The rain had just stopped in Los Angeles. The streets were wet, and the smell of damp asphalt hung in the air. Keanu Reeves stepped out of a modest black car, dressed simply in a dark jacket and jeans. There was nothing flashy about him, yet the moment he entered the studio building, heads turned. He didn't walk like a celebrity trying to be noticed. He walked like someone who carried his own weather, calm, steady, unshaken by the noise around him. The meeting room on the top floor was bright, wide, and full of expensive furniture. The walls were lined with movie posters of past successes. Keanu was there for a project he had been quietly developing for months, a heartfelt story about a forgotten war hero. It wasn't action-heavy, it wasn't built to be a blockbuster, but it had meaning. It was the kind of story that could touch people deeply. He believed in it. Across the long glass table sat the producer. He was a man in his late 40s, wearing a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut paper. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. From the moment Keanu entered, the producer's posture was leaned back, one arm hanging casually over the backrest of his chair, like he already owned the conversation. "So," the producer said, his voice dripping with polite disinterest, "you're serious about this?" Keanu sat down slowly, placing his worn leather notebook on the table. "I'm serious about the story," he said softly. The producer chuckled, glancing at the assistant in the corner. "Look, Keanu, we all know you can carry an action flick, but this isn't you. It's slow. It's not marketable. And no offense, but audiences don't exactly come to you for heartfelt dramas. They want explosions, fights, and you looking cool while doing it." The assistant shifted uncomfortably, sensing the disrespect in the tone. But Keanu didn't flinch. He just looked at the producer with steady eyes. "It's not about me," Keanu replied quietly. "It's about him. The man the story is based on. He lived through something most people wouldn't believe. I think people should know about it." The producer smirked. "You're a nice guy, Keanu. Really. But in this business, nice doesn't sell. Spectacle sells. We could take your idea, change the character to be younger, add a romance subplot, maybe make the war hero some kind of secret agent. Give the audience what they want." The words landed like a quiet insult. Change the character. Change the story. Make it hollow but shiny. Keanu leaned forward, his voice still calm, but there was weight in it now. "If you change him, you erase him. And I'm not here to erase people." The producer laughed, shaking his head. "This isn't personal, it's business. You've been around long enough to know that. And honestly, Keanu, you're lucky we're even having this conversation. A lot of actors in your position wouldn't get to pitch at all. But we're giving you a chance. So maybe be smart about it." Keanu's gaze didn't leave the producer. His stillness was almost unnerving. It wasn't the stillness of fear, but of someone who refused to bend. Then Keanu spoke again, his voice lower, softer, but sharper than before. "Do you know why people trust me?" The producer raised an eyebrow, leaning back further. "Enlighten me." "Because I don't lie to them," Keanu said. "I don't sell them something I don't believe in. I've turned down more scripts than I've accepted because I couldn't look at myself in the mirror otherwise. And if that makes me less marketable, then so be it. But if I stand on a stage and tell an audience this story matters, it will be because I mean it, not because I let someone dress it up until it's unrecognizable." There was a long pause. The producer's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a faint crease in his forehead. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in his own territory. Keanu could feel the shift. He knew the producer's ego was pricked, and that was dangerous territory. But he wasn't here to win a popularity contest. The producer's voice hardened. "I've been in this business a long time, Keanu, longer than you. And let me give you a piece of advice. You either play the game or you get left behind. No one remembers the ones who don't adapt." Keanu's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. Or maybe they remember the ones who don't sell out. The assistant's eyes darted between them, sensing that the conversation was becoming more than just a disagreement about a script. This was about values, about the quiet war between art and profit. The producer straightened his suit, signaling he was done. "We'll think about it," he said coldly. "But if we move forward, it'll be on my terms." Keanu stood, picking up his notebook. "Then I guess I'll see you when the terms are right." He walked out of the room, his steps unhurried, leaving behind the faint echo of a man who had just refused to bow to the industry's unspoken rules. What Keanu didn't know was that this meeting had lit a fuse. The producer wasn't going to let it go. His ego had been bruised in front of his assistant, and he would find a way to reassert control. But Keanu wasn't the kind of man to prepare for a fight in anger. He prepared with patience. And somewhere, deep in the silence of his calm walk back to the car, he knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, the sun spilled gently over Los Angeles, painting the city in soft gold. But inside Keanu's home, the mood was still and focused. He sat at a wooden table by the window, a cup of coffee cooling beside him, his notebook open to a fresh page. He had been writing since dawn, revisiting the story that the producer had so casually dismissed the day before. Every sentence he wrote carried the weight of the man whose life he wanted to honor. A man who had fought in a forgotten battle, returned home broken, and yet spent his last years helping strangers without asking for recognition. Keanu had met him once, years ago, on a quiet street in Vancouver. That meeting had stayed with him, haunting and inspiring him in equal measure. But Keanu's thoughts were interrupted by his phone buzzing. It was a message from his friend Maya, a casting director who often heard things before they became public. "Be careful," the message read. "I think the producer is telling people your project is a mess. He's making it sound like you're hard to work with." Keanu read the words slowly, his eyes narrowing just slightly. He wasn't surprised. He knew the producer's type. Men who thrived on control, who couldn't stand the idea of being contradicted in their own space. And when they felt their authority challenged, they struck back, not with open conflict, but with whispers. He closed the notebook and took a deep breath. Anger wasn't useful here. If he lashed out, it would only feed the narrative the producer was trying to spin. But he also wasn't going to sit still and watch his work be buried under lies. Later that day, Keanu walked into a small, independent film office across town. The walls were cluttered with old posters, mismatched furniture, and the smell of fresh coffee. Behind a desk sat Elena, an indie producer known for making powerful stories on small budgets. She looked up, surprised to see him. "Keanu Reeves," she said with a warm smile. "What brings you to my side of the city?" "A story," he replied simply, sliding the notebook onto her desk. "I want you to read it. No pressure. If you think it's worth making, we'll talk. If not, I'll walk away quietly." Elena's eyes lit with curiosity. "And why me?" "Because you don't make movies for noise," Keanu said. "You make them for meaning." She leaned back in her chair, studying him for a moment before opening the notebook. She read in silence for several minutes, her face shifting from curiosity to focus, and finally to something heavier, something close to respect. When she looked up again, she spoke softly. "This is good. It's raw. It's real. And it's nothing like what the big studios would ever touch." "That's why I'm here," Keanu said. But before they could continue, Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's him," she said. Keanu didn't have to ask who. She answered, putting the call on speaker. The producer's voice filled the room, dripping with charm that didn't match his words. "Elena, I heard you might be meeting with Keanu. Listen, I'm doing you a favor here. Don't waste your time. His project is a disaster. No commercial value. Honestly, I think he's lost touch with what works. He's difficult now. Elena's eyes flicked to Keanu. He gave no reaction. No frown, no smirk, just stillness. I appreciate your concern, Elena replied carefully, but I think I'll decide for myself. The producer's tone cooled instantly. Your call, but don't say I didn't warn you. The line went dead. Elena set the phone down slowly. He really doesn't want you to make this movie, does he? Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with quiet steel. He doesn't want me to make it without him. And he wants it on his terms, not mine. Elena studied him for a long moment. You're going to have a fight on your hands. Keanu nodded. I know, but some fights are worth it. Outside, the city buzzed with the usual noise of traffic and chatter. But inside that small, cluttered office, something unshakable had begun to form. An alliance built not on contracts or profit projections, but on belief. The producer thought he was playing a game of power. Keanu was playing a different game entirely. And soon, the storm wouldn't be quiet anymore.
2 weeks later, the quiet war began to turn loud. It started with a headline on a well-known entertainment site. Keanu Reeves pushing unrealistic vanity project. Sources say actor refusing to adapt script for audiences. The article quoted anonymous insiders, claiming that the film's concept was confusing, too sentimental, and not the kind of project that sells in today's market. The words were carefully chosen, not outright cruel, but enough to make readers doubt. Keanu read it while sitting in a small cafe, a half-drunk cup of black coffee in front of him. People around him laughed over their breakfasts, tapping on phones, completely unaware of the weight those words carried. He had been in the industry long enough to know that perception often mattered more than truth. The producer knew it too. His phone buzzed again. It was Maya. They're planting these stories everywhere. He's calling in favors. Be ready. Keanu replied simply, I'm ready. But readiness didn't mean recklessness. Keanu understood that if he pushed back publicly now, it would seem defensive, maybe even desperate. Instead, he focused on building the movie from the ground up without the big studio. He and Elena met almost daily in her cramped office. They brought in a small group of trusted crew members, people who cared more about telling a story than chasing a paycheck. They worked quietly, rewriting scenes, mapping out a production plan that could survive without corporate backing. Still, the producer wasn't done. One afternoon, Elena got a call from a location manager they had lined up. After a short, tense conversation, she hung up and looked at Keanu. We lost the train station, she said. Why? Keanu asked. He got to them, she replied. He told them you're unreliable, that the shoot would be chaotic. They don't want the drama. Keanu didn't slam his hand on the table. He didn't curse. Instead, he took a long breath and nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. Then we find another station, he said. But Elena could see the weight behind his calm. He's not just trying to stop the movie, she said quietly. He's trying to make you walk away from it yourself. Keanu looked at her with a faint smile. Then he doesn't know me very well. They pushed forward. Every setback meant finding another way. When a location pulled out, they found another. When a crew member got spooked by the rumors, they replaced them with someone hungrier, someone who believed. But the producer's ego wasn't satisfied with whispers and blockades. He wanted a public moment, a way to humiliate Keanu, where people could see. That moment came during a charity gala downtown, an event filled with actors, directors, and executives. The producer was there, surrounded by people, holding a drink like a king holding court. Keanu arrived quietly, shaking hands with a few friends, keeping his presence low. But the producer saw him, and he made sure everyone else did too. Keanu! The producer called loudly from across the room. The conversations nearby dipped as people turned. "Come over here! We were just talking about your project." Keanu walked over, his steps measured. The producer's smile was wide but laced with something sharper. "We were just saying," the producer continued, "that you could make a great movie if you just let go of that stubborn streak. Imagine, big budget, bigger audience, you could be a box office hero again. Or you can keep chasing that little passion piece until no one's left watching." The words were meant to sting, meant to put Keanu on the defensive. Instead, he took a sip from the glass of water a waiter handed him, then looked the producer directly in the eye. "You know," Keanu said softly, "some people measure success by numbers. I measure it by the faces in the audience when the lights come up. I'd rather make a film that 50 people carry in their hearts than 1 million forget by Monday." A few nearby guests fell silent, their eyes flicking between the two men. The producer's smirk faltered just slightly, but he recovered with a chuckle. "Still romanticizing the business, huh?" he said. "Well, let's see where that gets you." Keanu set his glass down gently. "Probably somewhere you've never been." He walked away, leaving the producer surrounded by people who were suddenly much quieter than before. Later that night, Keanu sat alone in his apartment, the city lights glowing outside his window. He knew that moment would spread. People would talk about it, maybe even twist it. But he also knew something else. The producer had underestimated the power of quiet conviction. And soon he was going to see what it looked like when that conviction turned into action. The following week, Keanu woke before sunrise. The streets outside were still, the kind of stillness that makes every small sound feel sharper. He sat at his kitchen counter with a notepad, not for writing lines or rewriting the script, but for something else, planning his next move. The producer's game had been loud enough to echo through the industry. Whispers had turned into questions, and questions into doubt. Keanu knew if he let the silence go on too long, the story would belong entirely to the other man. But he also knew rushing into the spotlight with anger would play directly into his hands. So instead, he decided to speak, but not to the industry, not to the producer, to the people. That afternoon, he called Elena into the small editing space they were using as a temporary production hub. Sunlight streamed through the dusty blinds, cutting lines across the room. "You're going public?" she asked after hearing his idea. "Not in the way he expects," Keanu replied. "No gossip, no names. Just the truth about the story we're telling and why it matters." They set up a simple camera in the corner. No stage, no backdrop, no studio lighting. Just Keanu in a plain black t-shirt sitting in front of a bare wall. When the camera rolled, he didn't give a pitch. He told a story. He spoke about the man he had met years ago in Vancouver, the war hero who had returned home without fanfare, who had lived quietly, helping strangers without asking for recognition. He described the day they met, how the man had stopped to help him change a flat tire in the rain, refusing to give his name until Keanu insisted. "He told me," Keanu said softly to the camera, "Don't thank me. Thank the people who got me here. I didn't understand it fully until he told me about his unit, about the ones who didn't make it back. This movie, it's for them." He didn't mention budgets, box office numbers, or studio deals. He didn't talk about the producer, not once. But his sincerity cut through the noise. When they uploaded the video to a small but loyal fan community online, it began spreading faster than either he or Elena had expected. Within days, thousands of people were sharing it, calling the project the kind of movie we need right now. Comments flooded in, stories from people whose parents or grandparents had served, strangers thanking him for caring about something real. The producer noticed. 3 nights later, Keanu left the editing space late, walking through the dimly lit parking lot toward his car. He heard footsteps behind him. Steady, purposeful. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" The producer's voice came from the shadows. Keanu turned, his face calm but unreadable. "This isn't about quitting. It's about finishing something that matters." The producer stepped closer, the street lamp casting half his face in light. "You think a little heartfelt speech is going to save you? You're playing in my world, Reeves. I decide who gets a platform. You're just an actor who doesn't know when the curtains come down." Keanu's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Maybe that's the difference between us. You're waiting for the curtain to fall. I'm still in the middle of the story." The producer's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Keanu said, turning back toward his car. "But at least I won't regret why I tried." As Keanu drove away, his mind was steady. The producer's threats didn't scare him. They confirmed something he already knew. The man was rattled. And when someone like that is rattled, they start making mistakes. Keanu didn't need to destroy him. He just needed to let him destroy himself. And the first cracks were already showing. Days passed, and the energy around the project began to shift. The video Keanu had made wasn't just still circulating, it was growing. Small blogs wrote about it, then larger outlets. Soon, major entertainment sites that had once echoed the producer's narrative were now publishing headlines like "Keanu Reeves champions powerful untold story and a movie Hollywood wouldn't make." But maybe it should. The change didn't come all at once, but Keanu could feel it. People were starting to talk about the story itself instead of the politics behind it. The more they talked, the less control the producer had over the conversation. In Elena's office, the team worked late into the night, finalizing casting choices and scouting new locations to replace the ones they had lost. Their budget was still tight, but there was a new kind of electricity in the air, an unspoken belief that they were no longer just surviving the fight. They were starting to win it. But the producer wasn't gone. One morning, Elena burst into the editing room with her phone in hand. "He's trying something new," she said, scrolling quickly. "He's pitching his own version of the movie. Same premise, but bigger budget, different lead actor. He's claiming it was his idea from the start." Keanu leaned back in his chair, reading over her shoulder. The article described a project that sounded eerily similar to his, but with all the depth stripped out, flashier, louder, and almost unrecognizable. "He's not making it to tell the story," Keanu said quietly. "He's making it to bury ours." "So what do we do?" Elena asked. Keanu looked out the window at the fading afternoon light. "We finish faster." What followed were some of the most intense weeks of his career. Dawn to midnight shoots, tiny sets transformed into believable worlds with creativity instead of cash, a crew running on coffee and conviction. There were moments when exhaustion almost broke them, but Keanu never raised his voice, never let frustration spill over. Instead, he reminded everyone why they were there. One evening during a rain scene, an extra approached him between takes. She was in her early 20s, wrapped in a wet coat for the shot. "I just wanted to say," she told him quietly, "my grandfather fought in that war. No one in my family ever talked about it much. But if he were here, I think he'd thank you." Keanu didn't have a rehearsed answer. He just nodded, his throat tight, and said, "Thank you for telling me that." By the end of the month, they had a rough cut of the film. It wasn't polished yet, but it was there. The heartbeat of the story, clear in every frame. They decided to hold a private screening for a small group of veterans, their families, and a few trusted friends. The room was quiet as the film began, and quieter still when it ended. When the lights came up, people weren't rushing for the exits. They were sitting in silence, some wiping their eyes, some holding the hands of the people next to them. An older man in a wheelchair rolled over to Keanu. His voice was rough, but steady. "You didn't just make a movie, son. You gave them back their faces." Keanu felt the words land deep inside. Outside the theater, a journalist who had been invited approached him. "Can I write about this?" she asked. "Write the truth," Keanu said simply. The next morning, her article appeared online. It didn't just praise the movie, it told the story behind it, the fight to make it, the resistance they'd faced, and the reason it mattered. It went viral within hours. The producer saw it. Keanu knew he did. Because that afternoon, he got a message. "We need to talk." Keanu read it, then set the phone down. The tide had turned. The meeting place the producer suggested was a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place where deals were made in low voices over expensive drinks. The skyline glowed in the night, and the air carried the faint hum of the city below. Keanu arrived on time, dressed simply as always, his presence quiet but unshakable. The producer was already there, leaning on the railing with a glass of whiskey. When he saw Keanu, he smiled, but it wasn't the confident smirk Keanu had seen before. There was a flicker of something else. Not respect, not yet, but uncertainty. "You've made quite a lot of noise," the producer said, his tone casual but edged. "People are talking about your little movie like it's the second coming of cinema. And you know what? I could have helped you get it to a much bigger audience. We still can. I can get you distribution, marketing, turn this into something huge." Keanu sat down at the nearest table, folding his hands. "And what would that cost me?" The producer sipped his drink. "Just a few changes. We tighten it up, add some energy, maybe bring in a more bankable supporting cast. I'm talking about making it a real event, not just an indie passion piece." Keanu's gaze stayed steady. "So you'd erase the very things that make it what it is?" "I'd make it watchable," the producer said flatly. "Face it, Keanu. You got lucky with that viral wave. But that won't last. Without me, your movie will play to a few art house theaters and then disappear. With me, it could make millions." Keanu let the silence stretch. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost soft. "It's already made what it needed to make." The producer frowned. "What are you talking about?" Keanu leaned forward slightly. "You measure success in money and reach. I measure it in the people who've told me it matters to them. Veterans, families, strangers who've never even met me. I've seen the faces in the audience, and I've seen what this story means. You can't buy that, and you can't take it away from me." For the first time, the producer didn't have a quick comeback. Keanu stood, ready to leave, but paused. "You said once that I didn't know how to play the game. Maybe you're right. But maybe the game isn't worth playing if it means you lose yourself." He walked away, leaving the producer standing alone against the skyline, his glass still half full. Weeks later, the film premiered at a small but respected festival. There was no red carpet spectacle, no choreographed interviews. Yet the theater was packed, and when the credits rolled, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted minutes. People were crying. Strangers hugged each other. Veterans saluted the screen. Word spread quickly. Soon, other festivals called. Streaming platforms offered deals, without the conditions the producer had once demanded. The film found its way into classrooms, community centers, and living rooms across the world. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a story people carried with them. The producer's own flashy version of the idea was released months later. It opened big, then vanished in 2 weeks. Critics called it hollow. Audiences forgot it almost immediately. Keanu never gloated. He never mentioned the rooftop meeting to anyone. Instead, he returned to his quiet life, occasionally visiting screenings or answering letters from people moved by the film. One evening, after a small community showing, a young man approached him. "My dad never talked about his time in the service," he said, "but after we watched your movie, he finally told me his story. I think it healed something in him." Keanu smiled faintly. "Then it was worth everything."
The night air was cool as he walked home, the streets glistening from a fresh rain. In the distance, the city lights shimmered. The fight had never been about destroying someone's ego. It had been about protecting something pure. And in the end, that quiet, stubborn belief had won. The story was told, and it would live far longer than the noise ever could.